Hi guys, do you remember this guy? His name is Daniel Hannan. He was a prominent member of the Vote Leave campaign. Now back in 2015 he said, and I quote, "But to repeat, absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market." Yes, the single market that Brexiteers like Lord Hannan, as he's called today, pulled Britain out of. But we must never forget that it's highly insulting to suggest that Brexit supporters didn't know what they were voting for. Anyway, you would imagine somebody who was so wrong would go into hiding, embarrassed to show his face in public, or at least not willing to put pen to paper and talk about Brexit. Well, you'd be wrong. Now, Dan writes for a number of pro-Brexit, pro-Tory newspapers. Here is a headline from his most recent article published on the 28th of January. "The evidence is undeniable. There really is a Remainer plan to rejoin the EU by stealth." Here are some of the more interesting snippets from the article. "For 6 years, I dismissed it as a conspiracy theory, an example of my fellow Brexiteers being unable to take yes for an answer. But the evidence kept piling up until I had to admit that they were onto something. There really does seem to be a plot to overturn Brexit." Okay, before we move on, there's a few things I have to say about this. I thought the Brexit vote was a demonstration of democracy. So if there was any undoing of Brexit, it would happen either via another democratic referendum or be part of a political party's manifesto. So if people voted for that party, then they were voting for another referendum or they were voting to undo Brexit. Why does Daniel Hannan hate democracy so much? But let's continue. The same strategy underpins their hostility to trade deals with non-EU states. At first I thought it was sour grapes. How could anyone complain about agreements with allies as close as Australia and New Zealand? Danny old boy, British farmers are complaining. The experts are saying that it will add pretty much nothing to UK GDP and it will remove protections for British products. Anyway, but now I grasp that it is really about keeping the door open. Perhaps the Australia and New Zealand deals can be finessed if the EU replicates them. What is he smoking? Why would the EU copy a crappy deal like the one that Liz Truss got with either of these countries? Then he says, "If Britain joins the Pacific Trade Nexus, the CPTPP, its standards will begin to diverge in earnest. That is what is panicking continuity remain." Look, Australia and New Zealand, I believe, have said that if the UK does not respect the Northern Ireland Protocol, it will bar Britain's entry to CPTPP. Now there's also the possibility that the EU could join CPTPP. Imagine how much control over standards they would have. This is all speculation, but I doubt our friends down under would be welcoming a country like the UK that is planning to break international law when it doesn't get its way. Finally, Danny says, "For their scheme to have even the slightest chance of success, they need to convince the country that Brexit has been an economic disaster." Actually, nobody needs to do any convincing. I think most level-headed people can already see that. They started almost the day after the referendum, but to their palpable annoyance, the UK kept growing faster than the EU. Okay, two things to say about this. First, bullshit, and second, the EU is not a country. So you'd be better comparing the UK with France or Germany or Italy and see how it has grown compared to those since 2016. Daniel was wrong, Daniel is wrong, but for some reason he's been asked by the Telegraph to write articles for them on a continuous basis. Finally, with a heavy heart, I'm very sorry to say that a good friend of the channel, Dano, who I had the pleasure of speaking to about issues like Brexit and the EU, passed away recently. He'll be sadly missed, and I wish to extend my deepest sympathies to his family and friends. I got to know Dano through this channel, and it was an honour to have had the opportunity to receive a snippet of his extensive knowledge on the issues covered on this channel. Goodbye, Dano.